Just another brother with another humble question. Just another brother with another humble question.
Welcome to another episode of A Brother with Questions. I am your host, B. Period. Before we get started, man, please like, subscribe to the channel. We are on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. What else are we on?
Instagram,
Facebook, TikTok, Instagram.
There you go. Twitter,
Spotify,
X,
Castbox. I be forgetting sometimes.
Everywhere. We everywhere, baby.
We're everywhere. That's right. We're everywhere. So tonight, as you can see, I have a guest with me. My guest is Cierra. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Cierra.
Well, one, I want to say that when I'm talking to B. Period, I am C. Dot. So, with that being said, I'm your girl, C. Dot. No, I'm kidding. So I am Cierra, and before I dive into who I am, I think it would be kind of cool to let you know how the question you just asked me kind of sent me on my path, my journey of really figuring out how to answer that question. Because my instinct is to tell you all of my titles, and that is that I'm 28. I'm a wife to their son. Actually, I'm their daughter-in-love, not in-law, in love. I'm their favorite child. No, I'm kidding. However, I wanted to list those titles off, and I remember answering that question and being like, Cierra, that's not who you are, but you don't really know how to answer that question on a deeper level. And so if I give you the deeper answer, I'm someone who loves, I'm someone that is always ready to give. I'm someone that is always ready to share the knowledge that I have with people. And I'm a listening ear. I'm a nurturer. I'm a healer. And there's a lot of other things to me. Some need improvement. Some are great. But if you want the titles, I can give you the titles. I am Cierra. I'm a wife to my husband, Rashad. I am a mom to my 3 babies, and I am a cosmetologist. I am the host of the Wisdumb podcast. And I do a lot of other things. I'm an insurance agent. That's my full-time job. There's a lot to me that I do that pull me in different places of my life. So that's a little bit about me.
Gotcha. Okay. I said we're gonna be long-winded today. I got it.
Long-winded. You know me though. Like you already knew what you was when you asked me to come here, which I want to say I am so honored to be on A Brother with Questions podcast. This means a lot to me, not only because I respect and love your show, but just who you are as a person. So that invite meant a lot to me. So thank you for having me today.
No problem. So let's see. Let's dive into the podcast first. Let's talk about that a little bit.
We can talk about it.
So let's talk about what's the podcast about? What's the goal of the podcast? What are we doing?
Okay. All right. So I don't know if y'all can see it, but it is spelled Wisdumb. And the original thought behind Wisdumb, the reason that I spelled it the way that I did, was that there are a lot of dumb mistakes that we make in life that we learn from. There are secondhand things that we can learn from parents, mentors, celebrities, whatever the case may be, where they've done something and we learn from them. But over time, as I have had the pleasure of being the host of the Wisdumb podcast, it's picking up a lot of new meaning for me. And one of those being that the word dumb itself, to dumb something down, the reason why a lot of people feel stuck, a lot of people feel like they can't reach that goal is because some stuff goes over their head, like intellectually. So sometimes to dumb things down, the wisdom that people get that kind of reach to people on a level who aren't in Ivy League schools or that kind of thing. So I feel like I'm kind of that middle person between coaches and mentors and people who have a story of tenacity, have a story of adversity, have a story of intentionality, And then from there, give it to someone who would never be able to be in that same room with them because they think they're not capable of it. Um, and I bring it to a level that is accessible for them. So I'm making this knowledge accessible to a larger audience of people. The reason why I started the podcast is because being an adult, being a wife, being a mom, having all of my beautiful titles, I felt stuck in life. Um, if I could say, like that hamster wheel kind of motion where I would look up a year later and I felt like I didn't do anything that really grew Cierra as a person herself. Um, and it was hard to speak on that for me because I wanted to keep this facade like, oh, she's got it all together, but I didn't. I still don't. But I knew that I wasn't the only person who felt like this. So I created this safe place for people. If you're just a mom, if you feel like there's nothing more to you than a mom, whatever your story is, to share it with someone, to know that there is a point of intentionality in our life that we have to reach to get out of this rut. And that's the first step. So I'm helping people take that first step. I don't have it figured out, but I'm walking in life with you guys the same way. So that's a little bit about it, to help people start living intentionally, rather than just going with the flow, because it's very dangerous to just go with the flow. You'll look out and you'll be pulled with the riptide, and now you're like feet and yards down in the ocean wondering why you can't get back to the shore, versus, okay, I know how to get out of this riptide. I can swim against it. I can swim with it and take the steps to get out of it, and not feel like you're just being sucked up. So that's my little analogy of the Wisdom podcast.
Okay, I got you. You're trying to help people
Yeah,
educate and move forward. So
absolutely.
I want to dive into something you said a couple of times, and it really, as you were talking about basically trying to introduce yourself and the thousands of titles that you have.
Mhm.
Uh, what is it that you were? I get a sense that, like you mentioned, you were
Mhm.
trying to find yourself,
Mhm.
or at least understand who you are better, and that sort of led you on this journey. And so I recognize you're probably at the beginning of the journey.
Mhm.
But what is it that you were, maybe you felt like you were missing, or was
Mhm.
missing, or whatever the case may be, that you were hoping to begin to find, if you will?
Okay. That's a great question. My answer for that is that everything that I was putting myself into, I felt one of three things. One, I felt a lot of confusion where I was. I never felt clarity with being, like, for example, the fact that I'm an insurance agent speaks volumes. You guys don't know me personally, but that was a big task for me, and that spoke a lot to me, to be able to know that, hey, you are intellectual enough to learn these things, and if you put your mind to it, you can do whatever you want to do. However, even being in this role, there was this sort of fulfillment that I didn't feel in that career. And I would say it's mostly for career things. Um, Now, don't get me wrong, with my marriage, absolutely beautiful, but there's still always another goal to reach. We always want better for ourselves, because even in marriage, you can look up 5 years and be like, what did we do? As a unit, what did we do to better ourselves? And what growth have we seen in our marriage? Even with my kids, what am I doing to be intentional with them? Am I taking the time out to, um, not only be the best parent, but make sure that they're being raised as a person who's going to love people, who's going to share light in this world and have values that the world can't shake? So that's what's important to me. And I do feel a lot of fulfillment. But when it came to my career, I want to say that because that is where, for a long time, I felt my purpose was tied. I felt like I couldn't find my purpose because I thought it was tied to a career. Like I had to find success in either being a nurse or a therapist or all of these things that I wanted to do in order to figure out what my purpose was, because I thought it was an occupation. And I'm now realizing that my purpose is not an occupation. My purpose is something that I carry with me everywhere that I go in life. So whether I'm at a gas station talking to the cashier behind the clerk, if I'm at a grocery store, if I'm talking to my kids, if I'm talking to my husband, or talking to you right now. And it's also something that I use to make me the best version of myself in whatever occupation I choose to be in. So there's a lot that I'm learning about purpose right now that is truly awakening a lot of things in me, because that's why I felt so stuck. Because I was tying it to what my job title said about me. If I went to college and got that degree, that is what I, for my, not saying like the society put that on me, but for myself, that's what I did, because I didn't understand what purpose meant or what my purpose was, and I'm now discovering that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So we were tying purpose to a career as
Hmm.
opposed to life. Okay.
Yes,
All right. And so let follow up to that would be, so do you feel like you have a better grasp on purpose now?
I do. And that doesn't mean that I have it down to a T, but I have it now to where I figured out that first step in figuring out my purpose and how I can effectively use that in every part of my life. Um, so I know that my purpose in this world, there's a lot that and I think that was another thing too, is I thought it was one. Like, you have one thing, stick to it and run. And I don't think it was something that was explained to me by like my parents. I didn't really have a mentor to help me um, figure that out. It was a lot of me doing soul searching and not in the best way, because I didn't know what I was really looking for. So I was just digging stuff up and making a mess out of stuff versus like, okay, this is why we're doing this and this is the point of it. So let's figure it out from there. So I say that to say that I thought it was one thing that I had to figure out, like, oh, my purpose is this, and I stick to that, and that's it. But I think because we are human beings, we evolve over time. And I won't be the same now that I am at 38, and I won't be the same that I am at 48. But there's a core piece of me that always shares love, that's always shedding light on things, and kind of being like the salt and the light in the world to the people that's around me, whether if it's a phone call that I'm making to help somebody get auto insurance, whether there's this piece of me that nobody can find anywhere else, because that's me. Um, and so I'm still putting the pieces of that together, but I have a better sense of my purpose is in me and not in the world.
Mm. What was the step that you taught? You said you took a step to begin to find that. What was the step that you did to be able to find that?
Um, Honestly, I turned back to God. I turned back to what his intent was for me when he created me. Um, when he called me all the things that I am to be. And when I got back in alignment with him through prayer, through seeking him, I was able to get back to what he called me to be versus what I've heard so much about me through the world, that it kind of became my voice. Um, and I would say that my biggest step was first reconnecting with God, which I've always had a connection, but that personal relationship, where I could talk to him and ask him those hard questions and ask him um, anything that I needed to figure out who I am. And there was always an answer for it, whether I was reading the Bible, whether I was speaking with someone, and it was an answer that I asked him, and there's no way they could have known that. Like, he used somebody to say that to me. Um, and through there, I took that, and I still do the work for myself. So whether if I'm dealing with undealt with trauma, whatever the case may be. But that was my first step, was reconnecting back with the one who created me.
Mm. That's interesting because when you look at the world today, especially when you talk about people in your age group.
Hmm.
And by that, I'm talking, late 20s, early 20s. There's been such a movement away from God. Or I don't know, maybe they wouldn't
The
say it's a movement
church.
away from God. They would say it's a movement away from church.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think that is as to one, why people are doing that and
Mhm.
why you chose a sort of a different path? Or maybe you feel like you're on that same path. You just choose to, develop a more personal relationship on your
Yeah.
own outside of the church.
All right. So for a few things for me, I would say the biggest thing is my parents, they took me to church. I was raised in a church, but they didn't put the emphasis on church. They put the emphasis on my relationship with God. Um, and I've always also had this sense of awareness around, like I'm a very empathetic being. So I was able to see my mom's relationship in the church, or she wasn't as involved in the church as, which like we all went to church, but I could tell what really mattered to her was those moments outside of church. Like church is great, but church is usually Sunday and Wednesdays. And depending on what church you go to, you may get a few extra weekdays out of the week, but that shouldn't be all that it is. So I saw my mom praying over me. I saw my mom praying to God on her own. I saw my mom walking around the house just talking, and I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "I'm talking to God, baby. I'm talking to God." And I saw that with my grandmother up until her last breath, like dying from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I saw her with her hands in the air, and she still praised God. She couldn't go to church because she was dying from cancer, but to see that type of faith did a lot for me. And I think sometimes people put the emphasis too much on church to the point where now my generation thinks it's the pastor or the bishops or the youth teacher. It's their responsibility to give us a relationship with God, and it's not, because they only have, if you're going to a white church, an hour. If you're going to a black church, maybe 3 or 4. But I say that to say it's not their responsibility to build a connection to God for us. We can only do that ourselves, just the same way we pursue a relationship with a lover or a friend. We have to do that work. And it's the same way with him. We have that choice. Um, but because not everyone had the same upbringing as me, I think a lot of kids, a lot of people my age who was raised in the church, who felt like it was force fed to them or that their voice was never heard in a church, if they saw any type of hurt that was caused by a pastor or whoever was a leader in the church that was supposed to be the image of God and like God and couldn't make any mistakes, they tied that to God, in my opinion. So they couldn't separate that the pastor is still a human and a pastor can make mistakes. And a pastor had to also give his life to God and say, I am not perfect, but through you, I have a new life. Even with us being saved beings, we're not going to be perfect. There's still a lot of work that we have to do daily, every minute, every hour. And some people don't want to do that work because they think it's supposed to be just handed to them. Um, and I think a lot of my age as well, what they struggle with is being cool. And it's not really cool to follow Christ because there's a lot that they think and what I've heard, let me say this, because what I've heard a lot is the Bible is the white man's religion. It's a way to keep us into a box. It's what they gave us during slavery times to have us act a certain way. Um, and the reason why I cannot and will not ever believe that is because I've had a personal encounter with Jesus Christ. I know for a fact who was right with me in that moment. I felt it, I know it, I heard whatever, whatever, whatever. I'm saying this to say that it's not cool to follow Christ because there's a lot that we have to give up when we do. we have to give up the drinking. We have to give up the smoking. And if we don't, we can feel hypocritical, like we already think the church is. Because that's another big thing. The church is very hypocritical. Like, how you up there preaching and you cheating on your wife? How you up there doing this? And there's a lot that I've heard over the span of my years in my generation. And the biggest thing that I have heard multiple times from especially men my age is that they were forced to go to church and at a young age with no real explanation of what was happening, no real explanation of the connection or how to pursue God on their own. And so it felt very fake. It felt very like people just dressing up every Sunday with these nice fancy hats, but they're going out and being nasty people in the world. They're not going out and sharing love and doing everything that they're said they're doing when they're preaching in the church. So I would say that's what it comes down to, is people feeling force-fed and not being able to know that a man, a pastor is a man. A bishop is a man. A youth leader is a man. And by man, I mean like a human. Like, they make mistakes still. They're not perfect. And that's why it's our duty to seek his kingdom, to seek his will, his space, so we know how to live the life that best pleases him. So I would say that's why my generation struggles a lot. Let me say this, because this is another thing that I've been thinking about. A lot of my generation tries to make God fit into our life versus how do we fit the life that he's created us to live. And what I mean is, there's a lot of sin that we partake in daily, and we justify it by putting God in our box versus getting out of the sin to be what he has called us to be. And that can be really uncomfortable, to give up the things that bring us pleasure, because fighting the flesh is real. And it feels like, how can I deny this? How would he tell me this is wrong? How can this be wrong? Even the LGBT, whatever, that community, they struggle with that a lot, because it's like, I feel like this is what I this is all that I am. And I think I've told you this personally, that has been the homophobic demon that has been, not homophobic, I'm sorry, the what's the one I'm talking about? Not homophobic. I'm trying
to say the spirit of wanting to be
with the same sex.
Yes.
No. Yeah, with same sex. That is something that at a very young age exposed itself to me. And that was really hard for me to fight off, because I thought that was something that I was just supposed to go into because everybody around me was doing it. It was normal. But there was a lot of conviction that I felt. And anytime I had a thought about it, anytime that I was like, ooh, maybe, I mean, what's wrong with it? This person is doing it. They say they believe in God. And we try to make him fit into our sin and justify our sin as I'm just born this way, or I'm created this way. And the real work becomes when we no longer live in that sin and we die to our flesh to be born again. And that has been a challenge for myself, but it's something that I'm willing to do because I've done it without him. I went completely away, shied away from it. I was the drinking girl. I was partying. I was doing what I wanted to. But I felt so much turmoil on the inside of myself. And when I am in line with Christ, there's so much peace that I feel. That doesn't mean that my life is perfect, because by any means it's not. There's times where I went without a job. There's times that I couldn't put food on the table for my kids, but I still felt peace. And that part is what the peace, the love, the grace of God, that's what keeps me in alignment with him, because that's something that this world won't ever be able to give me. So that's why I personally pursue him.
Got it. Whew, you said a lot, girl.
I'm sorry. You can cut me off sometimes.
We rocking. I ain't got no time. So I'm gonna roll back. on some of
Okay,
the
roll
stuff, on
back.
some things that you said. So one of the things that I heard you talk about, you said that serving God ain't cool,
Mm-hmm.
and so just my perspective. I'm a little bit older than you, not much, just a little bit. But when
I
you
won't say your
say
age.
when you know when we're 28, when we're 25, when we're 30, I think one of the things that we do fall into, especially when in
Mhm.
terms of religion in the church, is we do fall into the I'm going to call it a trap
Okay.
of thinking that trying to serve God isn't cool. And
Mm.
I think a lot of that, it has to do with our surroundings, right? So we're watching our friends do
Mm-hmm.
whatever they do that they consider fun. And we're thinking to ourselves that, man, I'm missing out
Yes.
because I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, because I'll say for myself, I've drank before, but I've never been a drinker.
Okay.
And a lot of that had to do with, it just never seemed fun to me, honestly. I
Mm.
mean, I would see people do it, and I was like,
Yeah.
y'all don't even look like y'all know what you're doing anymore. Like this don't seem
Right.
fun. And so, but because you're caught up in really it's peer pressure,
Mm-hmm.
you try different things. But the one thing that I think that you find when you do begin to submit yourself, and one of the things I'll say about that is, I mean, if that's a process,
Mm-hmm.
submitting to God is a process. You first submit, and you say it out loud, and you try and make that commitment. But truth be told, you can't make that commitment by yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you could stop drinking on your own, you would already do it if that's what you really
Yeah.
wanted to do. And so a lot of times, one of the confusion I think people have when it comes to religion is God is not asking you to come to him once you got it together.
Yeah.
God is actually saying, come to me when you got that drink in your hand.
Yeah.
Come to me when you got the blunt.
And
And
watch me
let's
deliver
talk.
you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I want to show you that it's not you that did this.
Mm-hmm.
It was your relationship with me that did this. And
Mm.
so if you want to, if in the beginning of your relationship with God, you need a few drinks to sit down and read the Bible, get your drinks and read the Bible. Because as you
Come
continue
as you are.
as
And
you
that's
as
what
you
he
begin
means.
to as you begin to build that relationship, it's not on you to do that.
Mm.
God is saying, I know you can't do that.
Bring your
So he's
burden.
saying, come to me
Mm-hmm.
and let's work this out. Come to me when
Yeah.
you're high. That's cool. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And together we're gonna work on it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the first few times we did this thing, you was high.
You
Okay,
was up here at the
you
gates.
know, and then maybe the sixth time, maybe you come back. Like, you know what? I ain't gonna get high this time. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just do it by myself solo. And then as you continue to build that relationship, God will work on your heart to
Mm-hmm.
want to change, to
Mm-hmm.
want to become a different person. And I think that's a part of that struggle, especially when we're young. I think that's a part of that struggle that we don't understand because we put the people we saw growing up on pedestals.
Mm.
And we've thought that, oh my gosh, they got their life together. I can't come to the church,
Yeah.
with a blunt in the car, waiting to smoke it when the service is over because they not doing that, and I don't want to be embarrassed by doing. But God is like, nah, dude, come to the service.
Yeah.
Well, I know you got a blunt in the car and an ounce of weed back there too. Let's do this though, bro. Like God is saying, show up
Yeah.
and build that relationship with me, and we will work on
Mm-hmm.
cleaning up your life and bring a peace to you. Where as we develop a relationship, I'll work on getting rid of the things that I don't like about you,
Mm.
or getting rid of the things that go against the word. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and I think that's part of the confusion and not letting people be people too.
Mm.
One of the things that's hard for people is allowing humans to be humans. That's so
Mm.
hard. Now we want you to let us be a human.
Yeah.
Don't get it twisted. Forgive me for doing what I did. but
Yeah.
you 20 years older than me. I can't forgive you for doing what you did. And that's, that's a problem that we have, because again, when you really get into his word, you understand that the devil is at work daily. So
Hmm.
I don't care if he's been pastor for 20 years. When he step off that pulpit and he get back in his car, the devil right there waiting on him.
Yeah.
Matter of
All the
fact,
time.
the
He was on
devil's
the
been in the
pulpit.
parking lot. You know what I'm saying? The devil's
Hey,
in the
look,
parking lot.
look.
He had 3 or 4 women come say hi. So it's we forget that there's the flesh, and then there's the man of God. And in a perfect world, the man of God is constantly working on himself, and 20 years in, he's not making the same mistakes that he made
Yeah.
his first year. Prayerfully, that's where he's at, right? And we hope that he's growing there. But the truth is, that man of God, he may be that far along, and he may still be working on some stuff.
Hmm.
And regardless, it doesn't change who he is, right? Because one thing we have to remember is God will use the rocks if we
Yeah.
won't speak for him. And so I can still use this. The gift can still be used in this man, even though he's still working on some things.
Absolutely.
But we have to give people grace to be who they are.
That's what I was
One
going
thing
to
I
say. We
say,
got to give people grace. We have to give people grace to get there when it's their time to get there, and how they need to get there, because that's the important part, is getting them there. It's not, oh, you got to walk on this straight white line, and if you take one's toe off, like, you got to start. No, it's not always perfect, and progress is not always linear. Sometimes you may feel like you going a little sideways, but when you're intentional, which is my favorite word, you know that there's an end goal. But when we don't give people grace, that's what makes the church come off as that hypocritical, that you in there sleeping with the deacon and the guy in the back on audio, and you telling me that I can't come in here like this. Like, that's where we have to extend grace to people. So it seems like we have a more welcoming church for people to come into, because the church should not be the place that only well people come to. It should be a place that sick people can come to too. And I don't mean that physically, I mean that mentally, emotionally, spiritually. If they're fighting any type of demons right now, whatever they have, they should be able to come to the church as they are. And that's why my generation doesn't, because they feel like with all that I got coming with me, I can see the lady side eyeing me in the third row next to the lady with her hat sideways, and I could just see how she's looking at me. Versus, mind your business, do what you're doing there with for God, and let me come do what I'm doing with for God. And that's all that matters, is our personal relation, because you can't send me to hell and you can't send me to heaven. So that's what that is. Like, there's only one person who can do that, and it
yeah,
ain't you.
and two, I think it's the church. And so the church is full of people. And so, we also have to get over the fact that not everybody is where they need to be.
Hmm.
So you might have sister so and so looking at you sideways, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, you might have sister, no hugging you, telling you how much she loves you today.
Yeah.
And so you got to focus on the love that you get. And unfortunately, just like you do in the world, right? There's certain people that come at you with your dress on, and they say
Hmm.
stuff too. But you look at them, you be like, whatever, I'm
Yeah.
fine. So when sister so and so look at you the same way, you gotta carry that same attitude
Hmm.
in the church, and
Hmm.
not get offended because sister so and so ain't delivered enough to just love you anyway.
Right.
You got to focus on sister no and sister who's still saying baby we love you, and
Yeah.
keep it pushing, because that's what the devil wants to do anyway. He wants to highlight the negative and
Hmm.
ignore the positive, because we do that generally even outside of the church.
Absolutely.
Like they like talk about all the time. You go in the comments and you read comments, and you catch all the negative ones,
Yeah.
and you miss the one that was like, I agree.
Yeah.
You
Don't
know,
even
I,
like
I,
it.
I had
Yeah.
that experience a couple of times. You know what I'm saying? I saw 88 negatives, but it was about 10 positives. But I made sure I
Yeah.
read all them positives.
I know that's right. I know that's
But
right.
yeah, I think and it's a tough place to be. But I think it goes back to realizing that. everybody in the church is working on something.
Yeah.
And once you can get into a place and realize that they're not there because they're perfect, they're there because they're working on something. They're
Mm.
there because God is delivering them through something too. Even at 80, they working on something with God and
Yeah.
delivering them through something. And once we get to a place where we realize that, everybody there everybody there ain't saved. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And everybody there is working on something.
Mm-hmm.
We can all get to a place where we can show up and enjoy what God has for us, and really begin to understand what God has for us. If we can get to a place where we can give everybody grace enough to be who they are and where they are in God.
Yeah.
Because if you're showing up on Sunday, or Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever the night is, the one thing I hope you at least there for is to get a message from God. And that day that you show up might be the day that God had a message just for you,
Just for
so
you.
that you can get over the thing that you were trying to get over, and you
Mm-hmm.
hadn't quite figured out how to do it yet. But if you don't show up, that's number one, you can't find it. And then number two, we one of the biggest things I think we miss is the work that we have to do on our own. Because I
Yeah.
think so many of us get caught up into the Sunday message or the weekly message, and
Mm-hmm.
because we never go back and find out what God said on our own, we get so caught up in what he said, and then when he
Mm-hmm.
fails, then it just looks like failure altogether. And one of the things any good church is going to tell you is you got to find God for yourself.
Absolutely.
And if you're not searching for God for yourself, then you're already wrong, because God is not here to be your hit it and quit it. God
Yeah.
is here to build a relationship with you, just like that man or woman that
Mm-hmm.
you were searching after. And so when you begin to chase him like you chase that man or a woman, God will begin to reveal things
Reveal.
to you that you
Absolutely.
weren't aware of. And so I'm with you on that. I
Yeah.
think if we all found a foundational relationship with God, I think we'd be better off,
Yeah.
in spite of where we started, and just work on getting to a place where we are at peace with Him.
Absolutely.
I think we'd all be better off with that. So I commend you on that. So is that to say then, as a follow up on that, um, is church a part of your life, or are you just still seeking Him on your own?
I do. I'm at an interesting point in life that I won't dive too much into. Um, but yes, church is something that I realized it's not it's not to look good to other people. For me, going to church is the community that I want around me. They are not saying I know every spirit and every person in there, no, but to go somewhere that wants what I want from life, to be in alignment with God, to be one with God, to be able to hear from Him and know that this is Him speaking to me. Um, and just like you said, there are days where I go to church, whether I'm attending online or if I go in person. And it seems like that message was just what I needed to hear because God loves us that much individually. And I spoke with someone the other day and she was like praying and asking God just why? Like why? That was her question, was why, whatever the topic was about, but why? And she was like, God, I know you may not answer me. I know like you may not even hear me, because in her entire life, she was downplaying her voice because the world told her that her voice doesn't matter. Like, shut up, go sit in the corner and stay in a child's place. So she didn't think that God would be listening to these questions that she asked. So she went to this seminar, and the guy who was talking went on a completely 5 minute tangent that was nowhere near the topic they were talking about, and literally said her question verbatim right back to her. And she said that was the moment that she knew God was real, because that was for her. There was no reason for her to, there was no reason for him to go onto that tangent. He just had this spur of a moment. It was like, hey, and while I'm here, let me tell you about this. And just look, I didn't even look at her, but it looked like all lights were just shining on her. And I say that to say that there is something when you're in the presence of God and um around people who serving God, that it amplifies your worship. And I have my worship every morning. It's me and my babies in the back seat, and we worshiping on the way to school, because there's enough evil in the world. So I do my part to do what I can for my children, but it's something that I get when I go to church that gives me that boost of like I can keep going. I can get a different revelation on God's word, because he reveals his word differently to every person. And there are different interpretations on his word, because that's how powerful and how amazing he is. He can use it in a different way, in a different sense. And it's the same verse that you just read last Sunday, but now I got a whole different sermon about this same line in the Bible because he revealed something else. Um, so I, for a long time, was not going to church. And that was because I was not seeking, I wasn't seeking for it. But it is something that I know for me is important, even if I'm the only one going. So if that means I got to get in the car by myself or get in the car with my babies, get whatever the case is, I have to, it's discipline for me. It keeps me going. So it's kind of like when you go to the gym after you ate all the bad stuff, or you go to the gym because you want to lose weight. I go to church because I want to get closer to God, but I'm also making sure that on the side I'm eating the necessary, and this is an analogy, guys, like a metaphor. I'm not trying to say this for real, but it's kind of like I got to eat good too. I can't just go work out and then eat 10 cupcakes. Like I got to work out, and then I also have to make sure I'm cooking and prepping my meals correctly, eating at the right time, making sure my mental health, my sleep schedule. There's a lot that goes into it, but there is a lot that comes from going to the gym as well. So that's how I view the church for me, is it's a part of my discipline.
Mm. And two, I think if you're going to seek God, I think it should be a part of your process, because what I think people miss about the importance of church, because obviously you can read the Bible and pray on your own,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things that makes church important is because it gives you that community. It begins to create a community of people, like-minded people,
Yeah.
who are seeking the same thing you are, so that when
Mm-hmm.
you do go through your struggle, because the one thing that the Bible consistently tells you is that you will have trials, you will have tribulations. So
Mm-hmm.
seeking or accepting God into your life doesn't now make your life, you know, peaceful all the time. No, there's going to be trials and tribulations, because you're going to get tested in
Yeah.
what you believe. And so, it's a part of that process of having a community of people who are experiencing the same thing you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not all at the same time per se, but they're all going through something, and they've all experienced something and gotten over something, and it's their faith in God that got you there. And so being amongst that people continue to gives you that support you need to know that you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I used this analogy one time with a young man who played basketball. I said, we accept when we play basketball, right, that we need a coach to coach us to get better. You
Mm-hmm.
know, no problem. Nobody sees that, right? Anybody that
Mm-hmm.
wants to be a professional, right? They don't get there by training themselves to
Yeah.
become an NBA player. No, they all submit to a coach. And so the church is the same way. Your pastor is your shepherd, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
pastor is your shepherd that is looking out for a flock, and he's your coach
Mm-hmm.
in your times of need to remind you and to help you get closer to your goal, in this case being God, heaven. And so it's the same concept. And so much in life, we'll submit to a mentor, we'll submit to a
Mm-hmm.
boss, we'll submit to a coach, right? Depending on what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing. But we get to the church, and now we're like, well, I don't need to submit to you. Well, wait a minute now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, you do. You do need to
Yeah.
submit to me, but that submission is not, I'm going to tell you what to do, and now you have to do it, and you can't
It's
question it.
guiding.
That's
Yeah.
not submission. That submission is the same way you shepherd a sheep.
Yeah.
Okay, you guide them to the places that you
Mm-hmm.
want them to be, And when you go astray, you guide them back to the place that they need to be. That is still submission, but it is not control.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge that a lot of people have, is they see the church as being a control place. But in reality, the church is not a control place. The church is a community that is led by a shepherd who is guiding his flock to the place that God wants them to be.
Yeah.
And you need that community, I think, if you're truly going to submit to God, because even God is asking for your submission. And so submitting to that pastor is the same thing. Because again, and I don't say that lightly, meaning you go anywhere and submit. You should, again, that's a process of seeking God too. Ask God, where is it that you want me to submit? So that you're in a place where you're not just hearing the word, but you're actually hearing the word. And you're hearing the word from a person that you trust, has your best interest at heart, and is guiding you to the place that God wants to be. But I think it is so essential to your growth, if this is the walk you want to have.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a lot of the tricks of the enemy to convince people that they don't need a shepherd.
Yeah, and I was going to say that. Yeah, I was going to say that because for me, there aren't a lot of 28-year-olds. Let me say this. There aren't a lot of 28-year-olds around me that's on that same journey with me right now. So it's real easy, like you said in the beginning of it, that we look around and it's like, am I missing out on something? Like, should I be throwing back shots right now? Should I be doing this right now and engaging in this right now? Because am I not having fun? And then you partake in those and you're like, why did I do that? Like, that ain't do nothing for me. I feel crappy when I wake up the next morning. I don't feel good while I'm in it. But that community of someone who is like-minded, for me, that is what is really important right now. And I'm praying that I find a community within the church that I'm going to where I have friends who are around my age that are seeking him. Because when you have someone that is saying, hey, Cierra, I know what it looks like right now. I know it feels hard. I know your flesh pulling you back. I know you see X, Y, and Z doing X, Y, and Z. Keep going. Don't give up. Keep going. When you have a team, just like that basketball team, someone who can come in and give you that second win, or who can, when you felt like you just missed a shot and they pick your head back up. Let's keep going. That's what is important to me, because there's enough people around me that's telling me don't do it. So I need to surround myself around people who is saying, do it. Like, if this is what you want, do it. Because when you hear enough don't do it, you'll fall right back into that trap of, okay, I'm missing out. Okay. Like, so I 110% agree that community from church is necessary. It's vital, especially early on in the walk. We can do it, but we can seek him by ourselves, and we should. But to have that team, to have those walls and that fence around the foundation that you're building up to keep the extra stuff out, that's powerful. That does a lot of work, or a lot to your good and your benefit, to have that around you. So
okay. So we've got to how we got to purpose.
Yeah.
And so now we're working on purpose.
Yeah.
And I assume through the podcast, you're working on, I guess, continuing your purpose, or helping to develop your purpose. Bring me back to how the podcast fits into all of that.
Okay. So for me, the purpose of my podcast is intentionality. Because I realized a lot, especially in that 25 to 35 age, there are a lot of us in this generation of millennials, really, that feels like we're just floating, or life is just happening to us rather than happening for us. And I think a lot of that is because we start to play in this victim mindset. Like, they're against me. This happened to me when I was a child. I could never do this because of this. So the point of the podcast now for me is to focus on the positive. And that doesn't make you this lolly gaga person, but it sets the tone for your life. So when we focus so much on the negative, or being the victim of whatever life has, the hand that life has dealt us. When we play victim or focus on that, we only water that, and that's what's growing is the negative. And then we look up and we're like, why am I surrounded by weed? Versus, you know what? Yes, that's there. Yes, I need to handle this, but that's not what I'm giving my energy to. So, what I'm doing is trying to show people that through adversity, through people going through, whether it's a rough upbringing with their parents, whether it's a relationship, whether it's finances, whatever their story is, how did they overcome adversity? And what was that point that they started living intentionally? What was the moment they woke up and was like, this ain't what I'm living for no more. Like, I got to do more, I have to have more, and I'm worth it. And when we focus on the positive, it goes from us giving energy to all this negative and constantly draining out to us now changing the inner dialogue that we have in our head, because that's where a lot of our issues come from, is our inner dialogue. We are very mean to ourselves. We tell ourselves a million reasons why it can't be us or why we're not worthy. And if I'm being 110% honest, I was real close to texting you and being like, maybe I don't come on the podcast, because I was in my head like, what do I talk about? Should I like go look up a politic, a current event? But that's not who Cierra is. Cierra don't thrive talking about that kind of stuff. I don't find pleasure in it. It's just not my cup of tea. And I was like, Cierra, why do you feel like you have to shift who you are to fit into someone else's world? Why can't you come unapologetically who you are and he be who he is unapologetically, and you guys have this conversation that bounces off each other without trying to change one another, but how can we help someone else? And I'm saying that to say that imposter syndrome is real. Like, why am I not good enough? This is why I'm not. This is why I'm not. But when we start saying, this is why I am, we start believing that. And I'm trying to teach people through the podcast, like, hey, instead of saying, this is why I'm not, this is why I am, start saying that. The world already teaches us to be our biggest or our worst critic. Like, you need to go back and look at what you did. But what happens if we shift and become our biggest cheerleader? Like, what happens at that point? When we give ourselves the love that the world is not giving us, that we crave from other people, when we question every thought that comes into our head. So when I'm looking in the mirror and a question is like, dang, Cierra, you sure you ain't da 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 da? You know what? No, where did that come from? Why is that thought even coming into my head right now? So I've been even intentional with my thoughts, because our thoughts become our beliefs, and our beliefs become our words, and our words are seeds that we plant. And we look up and we're like, wow, I really painted this life for myself. Like, I was just speaking this all up. And I'm not saying that to say like manifesting, but I'm saying that to say that our words are powerful and they hold power. So, but our words come from our thoughts. So we have to be careful with what we're even thinking and receiving and digesting, whether that's what we're listening to, what we're watching on TV, what we allow our friends to be. All of that right now, I'm going through a season of cutoff. That's the season I'm in right now, because I realized there's a lot that I was in that wasn't serving the purpose that I knew was for my life. And if I'm not serving you and you're not serving me, I can't keep giving you my life supply. Like, I got to cut it off so I can keep going. And I think it's okay for us to cut off without there being like bad blood. So I say that to say that's what my point of the podcast is how do we now focus on the positive and water the positive so we can blossom into the beautiful tree or plant, flower, whatever you want to be, and live the life that we want, so we can feel like, oh, I feel fulfilled by this. I know this is where I'm supposed to be doing. And life gets this sense of clarity, rather than always feeling like confusion.
Gotcha. Okay. So the point of the podcast is trying to be intentional.
Yes.
I want to piggyback on something you said,
Okay.
because I see it in I think I see it in a lot of young people too, and it's the victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
What is it from your perspective? Why is it do so many young people see themselves as victims of
Mm-hmm.
society or as if society is preventing them from doing something. Where does that come from?
I would say it's because it's easier to play victim and feel sorry for ourselves than it is to actually look at ourselves and see what work needs to be done. We're lazy. If I'm being 110% honest, a lot of people my age are lazy. We are creatures of complacency, and when life gets comfortable, we stop pushing for more, or we say, like, the government got this against us, or my parents did this against me, or my siblings got this and I didn't. And it's easy to put the blame on somebody else rather than now saying, this is on me. Like, that even goes for forgiveness. Like, sometimes you gotta forgive people who ain't never gonna say sorry because it's not hurting them. You only kill yourself slowly when you hold on to all these, like, bitter dialogues and these bitter the victim mindset. You're only hurting yourself because they don't feel that. Nothing you're doing with the bitterness that you're holding towards whatever you're playing victim for hurts the other person like you think it is. It's giving you this scapegoat to say, like, oh, I can keep living this lie. I can keep living this life because I'm the victim here, versus actually having to do the work that's necessary to face those dark places, because some of it is dark for people. And I'm not saying that to say that you didn't go through trauma and that you weren't maybe once a victim of something, but you have to come to a point where you take control back in your hands and you figure out your way out from that mindset. Um, and for some people, that's a lot of work, I think. And because we are very lazy, or we want instant results, it's not an instant process. That takes some therapy. That may take some years. That may take a day for some. Who knows what the journey may take? But to not know that on the next step is going to be like your breakthrough, not a lot of people want to take that step.
Hmm. Okay. Well, see, and here's why I asked that question. Because when I hear you say victimhood, right, one of the things that ties into me, or that I hear,
Mm-hmm.
and I associate that with, is, a lot of people like to, when we're talking about today's age, we talk about how there's, white supremacy, and there is, social justice that is,
Mm-hmm.
kind of holding minorities back. We'll just say minorities in general here.
Okay.
And so when I hear you talking, though, one of the things I hear you that I take from that is you don't see, you think it's a mistake that those things are, or accepting that those things are holding you back from something.
Say that one more time for me.
So I hear you saying,
Okay.
I'm interpreting, right? Reading between
Okay.
the lines here, that those issues that a lot of young people talk about, right? The
Okay.
white supremacy, social justice, police are killing us.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you hear those, we'll call them issues, but you don't feel like those are the issues that are preventing you from getting to the place that you desire to be.
Now, for that, I would say that those are real issues. I will never downplay that there are things that may either be in place, or the police brutality. Those are real. Um, and I'm not ever gonna say, like, yeah, no, that's not, because it can affect. We don't know if it ever will or if it ever won't, because it is still in present day. Racism is still very much alive. Prejudice is still very much alive. And when it comes to that, when the victim mindset there, I think there are, especially in our black men, because that's usually who fears the most for, like, white supremacy or police brutality, because that's usually who we see, the black men in the news story that's getting choked out and they die, or they get shot down for just a regular stop. that does instill a lot of fear into people, just like our parents pass down fear that they don't even know they're passing down. So I say that to say that that is very real, and I can't speak for a black man who feels that fear because it could be paralyzing for some people. Um, and that's just me being honest. There is a sense of, am I allowing this to stop me because there's a possibility that it may happen? Yeah, absolutely. That may just be something that we, and fear does that. Fear robs us of joy, robs us of taking risk. So there is a chance that that may stop somebody from going to seek a job, from ever driving a car, for ever thinking they're worthy to go higher up and wherever they are in life, because this may happen. Um, so I would say that is a fear can rob you of that, and you can feel like a victim of that because of that fear. But it comes down to, are you willing to actually step out of that mindset, of that fear, to see if I actually take this step, will that even happen? Or if I'm just stopping myself by thinking like it may happen. Like, because I know for me, if I get pulled over, I have fear, but it's not the same as a black man. It's fear because when I was little, my parents used to be like, what you see, like they say stuff that makes you feel like the police are just bad. So, and that's something that was like almost an inherent fear for me, where if I get pulled over now, I can feel my heart racing. I can feel the fear start, and I have to code switch almost. Like, let's talk like super educated. Let's, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. Because that was passed down to me. So in a way, I think it's it's a lot of gray area in that question, because there is real fear that that can come down to a young black man who saw somebody get shot just for a regular pullover, a regular traffic stop. There is a lot of fear that can be passed down, and fear, that's what fear does. Fear stops us in our tracks. So yes, they can become a victim to that, but how can we get out of that? Now is the question that we should start asking. Like, is this a really part of my reality? Have I encountered police brutality? Have I had somebody white stop me from going up or getting that promotion? Or am I doing that to myself? Am I saying that my boss is white and he won't give me that promotion because I'm black, even though I've never even asked for the promotion? Or am I saying, like, he actually said, hey, because you're black, I'm not giving you that promotion? Am I doing that to myself, or is this my reality? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's one of the points that that's ultimately what I'm getting at is I think a lot of times when it comes to those issues, right,
Mm.
we can accept that those issues exist in the world, but I also think it's a mistake when we automatically assume that because there's a black guy that got shot by the police,
Mm.
that if the next time I get pulled over, I too can get possibly shot by the police.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is a I don't know if we want to call it victimhood. There certainly exists a fear in some
Yeah.
people, but I think that's a mistake that we make in assuming that the situation that you saw on TV is about to be your situation.
Mm.
And it is a problem that I think that sometimes we get mentally caught up in,
Yeah.
and it does fear, going back to that concept, that does hold us back.
Yeah.
When in reality, I don't think for most of us, that's not what held you back. What held you back is your inability to jump out there and do whatever it is that you were trying to do.
Mm.
Because you might experience some of that pushback and that might try and stop you. But the one thing that I think we're missing about today is usually if there's one door open, there's probably two or three. And so just because the first one then got closed on you doesn't necessarily mean the other two, three, four will. But it's that fear that we have or the mentality that we have a lot of times that prevents us from going to find our next door, because we're caught up in a mentality instead of going to look for opportunity.
Mm.
And so, I think a lot of young people get caught up in that because it seems like everybody's pushing that on us, right? I
Mm.
feel like the world is pushing that we are somehow being held back, and the world needs to prevent us from being, or stop preventing us from being able to move forward. But a lot of times for me, when I see that, I honestly, I really changed my mentality about it, and I really see it as more of a trick of the enemy,
Mm.
because you know I failed to see how Christians, people who say they believe in God, and people who believe that God can do anything. Well, if
Mm.
you believe God can do anything, then there's not a man in front of you that can stop you from doing anything that God has for you. And
Mm.
so if God can do anything and God has my best interest at heart, even though God may allow that man to stop me, God knew already that that man was going to stop me.
Yeah.
So he sent me there to have that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so that experience is not going to break me, because if he sent me to have that experience, then certainly he can
Something
send me to
better for
have
me.
a whole much better experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I refuse to live in a world where those things are my driving force, when I
Mm.
believe that whatever God has for me, he has for me. And
Mm.
so no matter what's going on, I'm going to get to where he wants me to be.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
glad that you said that because I was going to ask for you then, what is it being a black man, hearing those stories? So that kind of answers it because when fear does drive us, because for a long time, fear is what drove me and I felt stuck. And that's what happens is you find all the excuses of why you can't, why the world is against you. So I love that you answered that before I even got a chance to flip it.
well, I mean, and I'm not saying that, I haven't been here all my life either, this has been an evolution to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time where I felt like, the police were out to especially get black men, but again, I don't look at things emotionally, I look at things logically.
Yeah,
And
we know.
so it's the gift and the curse. At least that's what my wife says. But anyway, she probably calls it a curse. But what I began to do, is just sit back and analyze those experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I saw that a guy got shot by the cops and he was a black guy. But then as I analyze the experience, number one, you begin to count, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's 365 days in a year. How many news stories did I see where a black guy got shot by the cops? So that's
Mm-hmm.
number one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start to analyze it from a numbers perspective, rationally, those numbers are small.
Okay.
When you consider the number of police that we have in this country, when you consider more than likely how many stops we have in this country, the number is small. Now, granted, in a perfect world, none of that should ever happen. But we don't live in a perfect world.
Mm-hmm.
We don't live in a world where when you go into the police academy, they do a racism check, right? There's not a test that you get that goes, oh yeah, you're not a racist. You're going to be
Yeah.
great on the force.
Yeah.
There's no test for that. So, people are people, and people are coming in with their notions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true, this country has done a great job at demonizing black men as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And while that history, well, no, let's rephrase that. So that history does exist. Although I will say that in some aspects anyway, we're better at not doing that. But we're still not perfect. But we're better. I'll
Mm-hmm.
say that. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of black voices are getting an opportunity to speak on a national level. So you're getting to see it from a different perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and not just when something bad happens. But we're better. And so one thing you can't do is erase, a history. You can just work on it.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will say, America's not America's great, but America's not solved all its problems yet. And so in today's world, I mean, it is great enough that, if you focus on what you want to do and what your plan is, and in my opinion, you build a relationship with God and let him guide you.
Hmm.
There's nothing that the world can do to stop you from accomplishing your goals, in spite of whatever quote
Yeah.
unquote hurdles or social issues that exist. God will. I like to say God will use your enemy to
Yeah.
fund
To
your
bless you.
fund your project.
Come on.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't care what my enemy says, because if God wants him to fund my project, he's gonna fund my project,
Yeah.
and we're gonna
Yeah.
say thank you and
And
move
take it.
forward.
Yes,
And
sir.
so I just, that victim mentality, I agree.
Hmm.
I think it definitely exists in young people.
Oh yeah.
And I would love to see something happen where they can begin to see that the world is their oyster, really. And whatever it is that they want to do in this world, those opportunities exist.
Yeah.
And yes, you might hit a roadblock or two, but my gosh, there's so many opportunities.
Hmm.
You're not gonna miss them all if you go
Yeah.
chase. And so, if we can just get back to that chase, I think that's one thing the previous generation had that this one doesn't, is there's so much access to information now, but not
Hmm.
everybody's chasing. Everybody's kind of waiting for it to come to them,
Hmm.
not realizing
Because we
you
used to
got to go
that
get
one
it.
click. Yeah, we
You
used to that one click.
got to go get it. It ain't, and nobody's giving it to you,
Yeah.
but if you go get it, you can get it, and the getting is good,
Yeah.
if you will. So I definitely agree with that. Um, so tell me this, tell me this, tell me this. Is there anything, I know we talk, but is there anything you wanted to ask before we get out of here?
Huh. Let's see. That's a good question. I should have had my list right. I knew I was gonna flip it on you. I knew I was gonna flip it on you. Um, what do you think would be necessary for our generation, um, to get that fire behind them again? Like how you're saying, like whether it's the victim mindset, whether it's finding purpose, whether it's being intentional, whatever it is that you would like to see, because I know that you're also a teacher a lot to the younger generations. From what you see missing, what would you say to someone who feels, whether it's like I'm playing victim or I'm not good enough for it? What would you say to someone who's maybe in my shoes or even younger?
Well, first, the first thing I would say, especially when you're talking about the teenager, a lot of the teenagers need to get back to reading,
Mm,
reading and researching, and that's because a lot of them don't know what the opportunities are now. So when they go to say, in terms of like finding purpose, which is hard for a 16, 17-year old,
yeah.
but it begins with reading, right? So if all you've done is watch YouTube videos, scroll on Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is you like to scroll on, you've missed what it is that people do in order to sustain themselves,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of money, right? You miss what people do. And so all you see then is what's around you. And you also, you see your teachers, yeah, if you're that age and you go to school, but a lot of those kids don't see their teachers as much.
Mm,
So you really just stuck with what's around you. And right now we have a generation that is raising kids that hasn't gone beyond the high school diploma themselves. And
mm,
so a lot of their kids don't necessarily see beyond it because they don't have people around them that have seen beyond it. And so the challenge that I think that solves a lot of their problems is reading.
mm-hmm.
Because if as you read, you get exposed to other things that you're not going to see on your TikTok feed, because
Yeah.
that's an algorithm, right? And so they're only going to feed you whatever you seem to be liking.
Can
And
I
so
ask you one question about that? Because I know a lot. I've been like my cousin, young teenager, and because of like these TikTok, Instagram feeds, they see a lot of content creators or people who are doing and making millions or living lives without having any education, truly, like the Kim Kardashians of the world, who got all the success and no real backing for it. What would you say maybe to the ones who are now saying like I don't need to go to school anymore, like going to college or just doing a trade, which is fine. Like I got a license from a trade school, but um I think the social media now is kind of saying college is not the way anymore. What would you say to that?
So I agree. College is not the end all be all for everybody.
Okay.
So I don't disagree. And so you're right. What they do see and what most of them aspire to now, because of what they do see, is they aspire to be content creators. And so
Mm,
that's the new thing. The challenge that I always give with that is number one, what you have to remember, like you brought up Kim Kardashian, right? Kim Kardashian is Kim Kardashian because people saw her naked. And so people saw her naked.
yeah.
People thought she was sexy, cute, whatever. And all of her fame ultimately stems
Mm-hmm.
from the fact that they saw her naked.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see a lot of that with especially young girls now, right? A lot of them are getting money based on the fact that you now not all of them are naked,
Yeah.
but all of them are half naked.
Right.
You
That's
know,
sexual
two
out,
steps
yeah.
from naked. You
Yeah.
know, and so they're making their money by essentially selling their bodies.
Mm.
And so for a lot of girls, I mean, honestly, it is an avenue. You know, it's not the avenue I suggest for you,
Yeah.
but it is an avenue, and you know, there's a lot of money to be had by showing men your body because men are
Mm-hmm.
stupid and they will pay you $5 to $10 a month just so they can see your body. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, it's true. So
Yeah.
for a lot of young women, that is an avenue that they walk down because it's easy. It doesn't require a lot of work, right? When you're young enough, you don't even have to work out to have your body. So it makes it
Mm-hmm.
even easier for you, right? And so that is an avenue. Now for young men, I tell a young man, you can go down this route, bro, but you better have a backup plan while you're
Yeah.
going down this route because you're not going to make money for a few years going this route. And if you're
Mm.
cool with that, fine, chase it. But recognize that it's not a short term. I mean, it's a long term plan, not a
Yeah.
short term plan. And so I do recommend for most kids, I recommend school. When I say school, school for me is either go to trade school or go to college.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm only recommending college for people who have a vision about what they want to do in college. If
Mm.
you think you're going to college because, I want to be an entrepreneur, so I'm going to go to college. I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna be like, hey man, you don't need college to be an entrepreneur. So if all you want to be is an entrepreneur, bro, you, you,
Yeah.
you need to have another reason to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
Because number one, college ain't gonna teach you how to be an entrepreneur. That's
Yeah.
not what it's for. That's not why people go to school. So that your goal isn't gonna be accomplished. So you need to have a better vision on what it is that you want so
Yeah.
that you're doing the right thing. Because especially now when you talk about costs, I mean, if you're going to locally, we have a Valencia and a Seminole. So if you're doing that, it's only going to cost you a couple grand to go. But
Yeah.
if you're going to a university, a state university, at a minimum, you're looking at spending 15 grand a year. That's the low end, and it goes way higher than that. And
Yeah.
so, if you're not going for a degree that's going to make money when you get out, I'm a proponent. If all you want is a psychology degree, I'll tell you, quick. Hey man, don't do that. Don't do that. If you're not
Yeah.
finna go and be a psychologist, which means you need to get a master's, and possibly a PhD, or if you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be a psychiatrist, which means you have to go to med school. Like if you're going to get a psychology degree at 4 years and then stop, you don't want to talk to me because I'm gonna tell you, hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
waste of time. You're gonna spend $60,000 to go get a job making $40,000. So it's
Right.
a waste of time,
Right.
in my opinion. But you know, but again, it goes. A lot of those kids though, at that age, they don't know, and so a lot. What I've seen, because I did the whole trade school teaching as well, is a lot of those students that graduate now with no vision. By the time they're 25, they go back. They do go to a trade school of some kind to
Mhm.
get a trade. And for me, that's at least better than what they were doing. But I even see that as a problem because really, you're going back to school to get a job that's going to pay you about the same thing you was going to make at Walmart anyway. And so, if you're going to pursue that at 18, so that by the
Mhm.
time you're 25, you see what bigger picture you can get into to
Okay.
really go out in the world and begin to make some real money, if you will. But that's what
Okay.
I see with the youth. I mean, with social media, uh, the lack of reading in schools has really ruined a generation, in my opinion, because they don't value reading.
Yeah.
I tell a story all the time. You'll give a test, and in order to answer the question, there'll be two paragraphs that need to be read, and the student will be like, after the test, you'll see they missed the
Yeah.
question. And so I'll ask them, I say, hey, did you even read the two paragraphs that was right there before the question? And they'll look at you. I ain't read that paragraph. I was like, do you
Oh.
realize the answer was in the paragraph? So all you
Yeah.
had to do was read it? And he was like, yeah, but man, that was two paragraphs. That's too long. I'd be like, two paragraphs? And so
Cut
that's
it
the
out.
mentality. And so when you think about that, these are the same kids that's a two paragraph
Yeah.
question on my singular science test. That's the
Wow.
same kid that has to now go take this state test, which is, 45 minutes of
Yeah.
pages
Of
of
reading.
paragraphs and with six or seven questions at the end. And then you're wondering why they can't pass the test. They
Mm.
won't even read two paragraphs. You think they reading eight? So, and so it really goes back to, one of the things that, again, when I think about our generation, they made us read.
Yeah.
We didn't like reading either, but they
Oh
made
yeah.
us read. They forced us to read. They gave us homework that forced us to read. And it's that foundation that ultimately, I mean, that's the only reason why I got the degree I got.
Mm.
Because when I was in school, I knew I read. I would read
Mm.
every day before I went to class. I was that dude. I wasn't doing nothing anyway. So I would read every day before I went to class. And so by the time I got to class, the teacher was just confirming the stuff that I knew
Right.
that I learned from my reading. And then, the little stuff that I didn't get, he helped me fill in the blanks. And I was like, oh, okay, now I
Mm.
get that. And so it's so fundamental, and it's what these kids are missing. And I think we see a change if we could get back to, if the school system can get back to this falsehood of collaboration and get back to a place where the kids are reading for themselves.
Mhm.
Because ultimately, if you're going to go anywhere in life beyond high school, they're going to expect you to read. And
Right.
so, we got to get back to that. And I think that's where this generation is lacking, is that lack of ability to want to read and then to expand their minds beyond what social media showed them, so that they have a vision that the world is bigger than content creation.
Mm.
And while it's a great, if you can get into it, it's great. But the truth is, for every person that tries, there's probably 500 to 1,000 that fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so once you put in that, it's like, hey, you know, do it like most people do it. Get a job that pays you, work your social media, and then at some
Yeah.
point, hopefully, your social media will take over for your job.
So last question for you. So you have your degree in biology, is that correct?
Yeah.
And from our conversations, like just between you and I, this is something that you were always passionate about?
Yep. Since
Okay,
middle school.
since middle school. So how did you find like keep this passion on fire or find your purpose? Like what was that looking like for you as someone who loved biology, knew what they wanted to do? Um, because going to college and getting that degree in biology is great, but did you identify that as your purpose? What do you identify as your purpose?
It's a skill set.
The
Is
skill
what it
set.
is. It's a skill
Okay.
set. And so, I identified it as a skill set to get to me to a place that I wanted to be. And
Hmm.
so, I really wasn't chasing a biology degree. I was chasing a dream. And in order to get to the dream, I needed a biology degree. And
Hmm.
so, it was just a skill set. And so, even now, it's a skill set. Now, in terms of purpose, one of the things that I love is I do love talking to kids because I found that kids are lost.
Hmm.
And while I can't be every kid's savior, I talk to the kids that I can to and try and inspire in them something that they hadn't thought about themselves so that they could get to a place where they're not 18, 20,
Hmm.
and not feeling like they're lost, you know. And so that's one of the purposes that I have, is
Hmm.
trying to inspire kids to do more than what they thought they were going to do.
Hmm.
Try and encourage kids to go, for the kids that I see that college is actually a viable option if they put their some effort towards it, encouraging that kid who didn't think college was for them to say, hey, there's an opportunity out here,
Yeah.
if you're willing to take it. And when they look at you, go, yeah, but I don't think I can do that. I'm like, nah, I'm looking at you, bro. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? There's something that I see in you
Mm.
that you may not see, that I
Mm.
know if you just put a little bit more effort into it, you'll be fine. You
That's
know,
huge.
but a lot of what, especially today's kids, again, because they live in a dynamic where they don't know anybody who went to college, because their parents are doing whatever they're doing and they're
Hmm.
living, but again, they didn't go to college. So a lot of these kids don't even know what that looks like. And
Hmm.
so a part of them not wanting to go is the fear of, it sounds hard,
Yeah.
right? And so helping that kid realize, you know, yes, it's going to be harder, but hey, man, it's not like this. You're not
Mm.
being forced in a building for 7.5 hours a day,
Hmm.
in order to learn. There's going to be a freedom that you get from that, that's going to not only free up your time, but it's also going to free up and give you more time to do whatever preparation you need
Mm.
before you have to take these tests. And so it just becomes a matter of time management. If you'll put the time in, you'll have plenty of time to do what it is you need to do to be successful.
Mm.
And so it's that fear, it's breaking down that fear, because we're always fearful of what we don't know, fearful of what we can't see. And
Yeah.
when you grow up in a household where your parents love you and they're doing everything they can, and so it's not the love that you're missing, but it's the experience.
Mm.
Especially when, again, you come from an immigrant family who, your parents are working hard at whatever they do, but it didn't require them to go to college.
Yeah.
And so it's that challenge of pushing through the fear of that, is what I
Yeah.
enjoy, working on those one or two kids you can get to every year, and encourage
That's
them to do
dope.
better.
That's dope. I love that answer. And we need more people like you who speak life and those see what makes people stand out, because when we're surrounded by a lot of people who, or once again going back to that being cool, um to stand out like a sore thumb, you don't really want to do that. So you may play dumb or dumb down some stuff. But for you to speak life into these young kids and to let them know that they are capable of it, and that is probably that one little voice they needed to hear to shift their mindset. Because had someone said that to me at a super young age, and a lot of my fear came from the unknown. Like, if I do this, what's going to come from it? If I take this first step, what's going to happen? That's really dope that as a teacher you do that as well, because you don't have to. That ain't what you're getting paid to do. But the fact that you do that is
Somebody's got to do it.
that's real dope.
And I said, I'll piggyback on this and say this. That's one of the importance of HBCUs, and
Mm.
why we don't, at least there's some of us that don't talk about them as much. But that's one of the goals and the functions that they serve, is for a lot of young black kids. They go to school with other young black kids, and they are the minority generally if they
Hmm.
are striving. They're out trying to make straight A's all the time, or whatever the case may be. You're usually in the minority with that. And so to me, the importance of the HBCU, especially for that kid who's fearful of what that looks like, going to an HBCU now, where not only do you see other black kids who are just as smart as you, but number two, you see other black kids who are doing that challenging thing that they say black people can't do.
Yeah.
You're watching other black kids do that too. And now you begin to develop this community, right? Because once you get in the biology department, by the end of that second year, going into that third year, you're in the same class with the same people for the next 2 years. And so now you're in a class where you're forced to forced in the sense that you're all the same. You still have to choose to make your relationships, but you're going to class with the same class of people over and over for the next 2 years. And so now, if you choose to, you have people who are like-minded, who are achieving the same goals that you can now piggyback on, and you don't have to feel afraid because you're the only one. Because they're there with you, they're struggling with you sometimes, or they're struggling and you're not struggling, and vice versa. And so it's that encouragement that you need sometimes when you don't see it growing up, that you can now see in college to help push you to the next level, and then go off to the quote unquote PWI or whatever the case may be to get your graduate degree. But you've built a foundation with your people. To recognize that, hey, I'm not out here just by myself. I've got 10 other friends that are, maybe we're not all at the same graduate school, but we're all at graduate school. And so we're all doing this together, and we're all pushing each other even after our bachelor's or whatever the case may be to get to a particular goal. I think that is so important in that HBCU foundation, which is why, for me, I always am trying to push kids into a HBCU first. Although especially locally, we live in Florida, so the first thing people think of course, is UCF. But I'm like, yeah, you can go there if you want.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I hear you. I hear you.
HBCU is never my first choice, but it is down the road. Of course, though, there's a much better school in Tallahassee that you would love, that I would recommend. If you got to just stay in Florida. But it's I think that is so important, and that's one of the tragedies I see, because most young people, they don't know what an HBCU is,
right?
Because again, their parents didn't go to college, their parents aren't from here, and so they have.
Or there's a lot of a negative talk about HBCUs, like
that too, but that plays back into the negative talk when it comes to Black American, right? That's where that comes from. Because when you're foreign and you come here, they tell you, them black people, man, them American black, they something else. And so you assume that a school full of American blacks is going to be the same way. But the reality is, it's not like that at all. When you go to college, there are your party people, and
that's everywhere though.
There's some party people that all they do is party with no success. But then when you get to college, you find the ones too that party with a whole bunch of success. So it's the whole gamut of people. But again, the HBCU usually, you're going to see your people, and especially I think too, because if we're being honest, the place to make money today is in STEM, and so going to a HBCU and seeing other kids who want to be engineers, who want to be a pharmacist, in those types of programs that are pretty much guaranteeing you high 5 and 6-figure salaries, I think it's so important, especially for young people.
Yeah, that's dope. I love that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So that's it. That's all you got for me? Oh, that's easy. This is easy.
I mean, I'm going to have to bring you on the Wisdom podcast for the rest of my questions, okay? You ain't finna get a free solo dolo on your...
All right. That's cool. Well, I appreciate you for joining me.
Absolutely.
This has definitely been a good conversation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
We went into this, and I asked you one question. I said, "Is there anything you want to talk about?" And you said, "What'd you tell me?"
I said, let's just flow.
Let's just flow,
Let's just, and we
I love
did.
flowing, you know what I mean? I think in conversation that's what you should do anyway, right? It's just flow and
Absolutely.
see where it goes. And I think, we took I had no idea we were gonna spend 45 minutes talking about Jesus today.
Hey,
But
when
that's
we
what we
do it,
did. And why not? Hey
yeah, because
man,
somebody needs to hear that. Just
everybody
one,
need
if
to.
it's just one person that it can reach, then we did a great job. But yeah,
So
I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I'm excited. I'm glad that I saw myself as worthy because I like what for real. I was about to be like, bro, what he want to talk to me? I can't talk about no politics and I can't do it. That's just not me. But coming as I am and you being who you are and something that I really adore and honor appreciate about you is how firm you stand in your belief with Christ, your belief with what you believe in, whether it's about the Black community, politics, whatever it is, you're unshakable in that. And that's something that I look up to and admire because you're like, this is what I've researched, what I've learned, and what I know is true for me, and you stand tall on that. And I love it. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you tonight, sir.
awesome, awesome. Go ahead and shout out the podcast. I mean, I know this
I
is shirt.
will. I will. So y'all see the shirt. It's the Wisdom Podcast. I am your host, Cierra, but tonight I am the guest, Cierra C. Dot. And I am on all streaming platforms. So if you want to go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, if you want to go over to Spotify, once again, it is a place for the lost, a place for people who feel like they're stuck in a rut, can't find their purpose, and they want to get unstuck. You have to want it for yourself. And that is the first step. So if you want that for yourself, if you're ready to figure out how to live intentionally, if you're ready to hear people overcome adversity, and how they now live intentionally. Or if you want to come onto the podcast and, maybe tell your story, that'd be dope too. But go ahead, the Wisdom Podcast or Wisdom_podcast for all social media. And that's where you'll find me. So
When do you
I've
drop?
been,
When they
oh,
find?
I drop every Wednesday at 8 a.m. So far it's been guest that's coming on every week. It's like a revolving guest. I bring in somebody different. I talk to coaches, I talk to people internationally, I talk to people of all ages. But my target, the ones that I truly want to reach out to, are those of my generation. The lost generation is what people like to call us as well, who get stuck in the idleness of life and look up, and now we're 40 something, and it's like, what did I do? Because I don't want us to look up and be like, what did I do? I want us to be like at 40 and be like, yeah, this is better than what I even planned. So that's what my heart is for, to help the people who feel like I do, or I did, and I still do, because I'm not perfect. I'm walking through this life with y'all. So um, I'd be glad to have y'all if y'all down for a listen or a watch. It's audio, visual. Just have dope conversations like this. Very authentic. We just be flowing. I bounce off of people. And I just create a safe place for people to tell their story of triumph and help somebody else to feel not alone or to see a way out of their darkness.
Got it. All right. Well, we appreciate you for joining us
Yeah.
here at A Brother with Questions. It definitely has been fun.
Yeah.
Different episode for me. Um, but it's definitely been fun. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for listening. Again, like, subscribe, share this podcast with somebody that you think may benefit from the conversation that we had today. Again, like our TikTok, our Instagram, our
Yeah.
Facebook. Listen, Spotify, Castbox, man. Thank y'all for listening. I am your host, B. Period, and I am out.
See, dog?
Yeah. Yeah.